Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Backlot Box Office, brought to you by the Backlot 605. I am your host, Brian Mensing, and joining me, as always, is my wonderful co-host and cohort in all of this wonderfulness is Derrick Veurink. How you doing this evening?
Pretty good, Brian. You?
I guess I can't complain. It's been a very, very big weekend. One that I know that you and I have been looking forward to getting an opportunity to finally discuss after how many weeks and deadlines pushed and all that
Yep,
fun stuff.
absolutely.
And clearly you came prepared. You are wearing an amazing Spider-Man t-shirt because this is the weekend of the magnificent end of the current Spider-Man trilogy of Spider-Man No Way Home. You and I both had an opportunity to go see this on the Thursday preview,
Yep.
and for those that either A have not seen it, I would say that you and I are both in agreements. This is something that everybody should go see and see it as soon as possible.
Yep.
Otherwise, you're going to have problems trying to avoid the internet for the until then. But also too, I mean, in terms of if it is a quote unquote the last of the trilogy for Tom Holland's current Spider-Man trilogy, I'd say it was a good way to end, and I think it was a good way to for us to experience it because I haven't had an experience at the theater for a movie like this basically since Endgame.
No.
With
Yeah.
the right kind of people in the theater that would clap and hoot and holler at the things that we were excited to see, but you could hear a pin drop at all of the right times that you needed it to be, and it was an amazing experience. And um, by all means, it was. I'm so glad we finally got that movie. So
Yeah. I mean, obviously we won't spoil it here, but
nope.
it does what it does, and it does it magnificently and
Hmm.
beyond anybody's wildest expectations. So
Yep,
we'll leave it at that.
exactly. Yep. I put it this way: is do I feel there's a lot of fan service? Yes, but you know what?
They did it right.
I'm one of those fans, and I was serviced.
Yes.
So
Same here.
going into that, we have there we go. Spider-Man coming in at number one at $253 million domestically, and I see that you put in here that we have $587 million globally in 3 days. Like, there's movies that have done this, but it was over the course of the entire iteration of them being in the theaters, and Spider-Man did it in 1 day or
Well,
3 days.
I mean, there's some iffiness here because I know some places like Australia. I think they got it on Wednesday. This
Okay.
is kind of ultimately adding up 5 days. I mean, even in the US, showing started at 3 p.m. on Thursday. So that's
Mm-hmm.
basically a fourth full day right then and there.
True.
But the main thing here is no matter how you slice it, this is a ginormous number. Going into this weekend, there's a part of me that was wondering, like, okay, obviously we've seen movies, do okay by COVID standards. Obviously, the biggest opening we had prior to this was Venom 2, and that only
Mm-hmm.
did 90 million. We definitely knew it was going to clear 100 million. I was thinking maybe like, okay, 150 might be nice.
It was
But
and a very justly number based on what we've been seeing previously.
yep. But obviously there was the concerns about, okay, Omicron is starting to fire up here. How's that going to have an effect on audiences? Because like New York's starting to do some significant stuff now.
Mm-hmm.
Canada, they've gone to 50% theater capacity again, which is really hard to pull off when you've already pre-sold a bunch of tickets for Spider-Man.
Yep.
So to go from good by COVID standards to good by all time standards is absolutely mind blowing. And I think we saw the hints of that already when we went on Thursday night and the theater lobby was bananas packed
Mm-hmm.
with the type of crowd activity that certainly I had not seen in the theater since probably the opening night of Rise of Skywalker, which was basically on this weekend 2 full years ago.
Yep.
So, it's certainly the thing that theaters have been looking forward to for a long time is having a true blue blockbuster. And especially given that this is just the opening weekend, but
Mm-hmm.
obviously as people get on their breaks for Christmas, Christmas weekend, is going to be huge for this. New Year's weekend also going to be huge. It's basically has at least 2 full weeks where it's going to do massive numbers every single day.
Mhm.
And the big question here is just how far, at least domestically, how far is it going to go? I think 500 is definitely going to happen,
Yep.
maybe 600. Because certainly this is a movie that people are going to go to again and again and again as well. I kind of see like that Force Awakens type vibe, where Force Awakens was another movie that was very anticipated, very fan servicey as well, but
Mhm.
it did it right and people kept coming back. And I think that's what we're going to see out of Spidey here as well.
That'll be awesome. Yeah, and you decided that, you know what, hey, let's throw a little bit of extra info out there, which I appreciate because I think it was very fascinating.
Yeah.
Um,
The first thing I want to mention, though, before we go to those, is
yeah.
I did put the 587 million global number here. And what makes that especially impressive
Mhm.
is that China does not yet have a release date for this movie.
Oh
So they
wow.
are not contributing. In fact, they have not had any of this year's Marvel Studios movies. They did not have Black Widow. Obviously, had the issues with both Shang-Chi and Eternals not going to be able to get past the Chinese government over there.
Mhm.
And for whatever reason, they have not uh, allowed Spidey its release yet. So, I mean, if we're heading down where I think we're going to head down with this movie is probably going to make $1 billion worldwide. The first one to do $1 billion again since the pandemic, and
Mhm.
probably going to do so without China, the second biggest, or in some cases, the absolute biggest movie
Right.
market.
That's
So
pretty impressive.
it is. So, but yeah, and then I also put in here this got an A plus cinema score, not an A, not an A minus, an A
Mhm.
plus from audiences on Friday. And the only movies that have ever done that have been the first Avengers, Black Panther, and Avengers Endgame from the MCU. So it is in
Mhm.
very hallowed ground, so to
Definitely.
speak. And again, is going to indicate the massive word of mouth that's going to carry on for this movie through the next several weeks. So it's going to be very exciting to see how far this goes over the holidays.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that when they finally released the or lifted the review embargo, that Rotten Tomatoes right out of the gate it came out at 100%. I was like, well, at
Yep.
least that's a good way to start, because at
Hmm.
least you know that obviously it can't go up, it's going to go down, but
Yep.
clearly if you're gonna start at 100%, you're not gonna have a few days later be down to like 60%. Like that's just
Yep.
not gonna happen. And I know that by the time we went to go see it on Thursday, it was down to like 95, and I think last I saw was at 94. So, and I
Which is still
imagine,
very good.
which is fantastic. I mean, for a critic standpoint and whatnot, especially just coming off of Eternals, which is not reviewed as well as it was, and there's been very, divisive on John Watts's previous entry into this
Yep.
uh,
Far from
with
home.
Far From Home. So I mean, it's good to see that this is kind of rebounded for the Tom Holland Spider-Man franchise.
Yep.
All
All
right.
right.
So yes, you put in here that we have some Spidey stats. Highest grossing movie of 2021 in 4 days. Shang-Chi at 224.54 million, as well as being the third biggest weekend opening of all time behind Endgame and Infinity War. So again, like you said, and the part I find kind of humor in this here is outside of the 2021, but the third biggest opening weekends, and we're still talking about MCU movies. We can't even get out of the Disney Marvel universe to talk about biggest openings. Or did when you pulled these numbers, was it specifically just looking at Marvel?
No, these are all movies. Because as we'll get to in the next bit, it did beat some other big ones like The Force Awakens, which is also a big December opener as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that is the third of all time. And as we should also mention, we're recording this on Sunday night when we just have the estimates in. So as of
Mm-hmm.
this particular moment, it's at $253 million. But if it managed to keep defying expectations by the time you see this on Monday night, the final number might have an extra nearly 5 million in the bank, in which case it could even beat Infinity War. Who the heck knows at this point? Anything I think is possible with this movie. But again, the fact that it got this far, especially again, when we're talking about the winter time, when people are busy with Christmas shopping, with
Hmm.
Christmas programs, all sorts of other holiday activities, the fact that all these people still found the time to watch a 2.5 hour Spider-Man movie, plus however much it takes to go to the theater, get in your seats, get your popcorn, get back home. That's quite a time investment, and a lot of people made
Hmm.
that this weekend, so that cannot be denied.
No, definitely not. No, and I know it's one thing you and I were going. Yep, not even a question.
Nope.
And that's pretty impressive considering the fact that pretty much everybody's websites were crashing because of the pre-sales for this film. So
Well, not just that. I mean, they were crashing this Thursday night while we were at the theater, because
that's true.
people also trying to buy tickets that night, as well as also people, if they hadn't saved it to their Apple Wallet or whatever, were trying to access it on their phone and were somewhat out of luck, depending upon their situation. It was very sluggish on Thursday. It was very sluggish on Friday night as well. It's a big time for the box office, and that's just another signal of it. So, hooray!
Mm, yeah. All right. More stats here. The biggest December opening weekend of all time, like you said, beating The Force Awakens. And then looks third biggest Thursday preview behind Endgame and The Force Awakens. So again, you know, what I find fascinating about this is clearly, when Disney said, you know what, we're gonna buy Lucasfilms, we're gonna buy Marvel. Clearly, they knew what was in front of them, and what the opportunity was going to present itself. Because all of these are post Disney acquisition films and whatnot, and
Yep.
clearly they knew what they were doing, and they're obviously not hurting. So I find it
No.
also fascinating that again we can't even get out of the Disney Mouse house when we talk about the biggest December as well as the biggest Thursdays, like everything.
But I will also give credit to Sony as well, because
True.
obviously they obviously have big hype. I mean, I remember that Monday night, when they premiered the first trailer at CinemaCon, and then it dropped simultaneously online as well, and everybody was just going bananas about it at that time. I mean, from the get go, Sony has had a very fine line to tread with the marketing of this movie, and trying to tread very much on a specific line with not revealing too much
Yep.
about the contents of the movie. I kind of compare it to Ghostbusters, where like in the final days leading up to the release of the new Ghostbusters movie, they started making some very obvious hints in the marketing as to who was going to show up at the end. Even having like voices, and like you can see it from like their neck to their waist
Hmm.
in the shots. But they didn't even go to that extent with Spider-Man, and I'm guessing part of that was probably Feige and Marvel's influence as well.
A little bit.
But you have to give them credit for like even those all like conjecture and hearsay and rumors in terms of who's going to show up in this movie and all yada yada. The fact that they never pulled that trigger and just kind of relied upon like the basic general hype generated from that, and not spoiling that in the marketing, is another really impressive sign of how people figured out that they were going to show up for this no matter what. So,
Hmm. Oh, definitely. And if there's anything that I number one, I think Endgame helped whatever, but at least if there's one thing that this movie has proven is that Tom Holland has learned how to be able to keep his mouth shut. Because we know that there's a reason why he didn't know a lot about things of previous films and whatnot, and so
yep.
and he probably had an incomplete script just like everybody else did because that's what Marvel does. But at the same time too, he already knew what he had filmed with who he had filmed it with. So I respect Tom Holland's ability to keep his mouth shut this time.
And also kind of wonder, because again, Spider-Man No Way Home was entirely filmed during the pandemic, like late
Hmm.
last year, early this year. So I even have to wonder, like, for several scenes, did he actually film stuff with those people, simultaneously on the set, or did Marvel do some of their trickery? Who the
True.
heck knows? I know there are some conspiracy theories about that, from previous Marvel movies. So who the heck knows? But
They never
it
do
all worked
that.
out.
They never
So
do that, right? All right, going on to the next here, we have, well, as we leave Spider-Man behind, even though we will know that we will talk about him next week. Encanto comes in at number two with a measly, in comparison, $6.53 million, but only a 35% drop in its fourth week. And coming soon here, obviously, as we've mentioned multiple times here, is coming to Disney Plus here in a week.
Well,
Uh,
this Friday.
this Friday. Yep, that's right. Wow, I can't believe it's already Christmas. All right. So yeah, I mean, I honestly at this point right now, with any movie that was coming out this week, the numbers are going to be down. Because any theater is going to attempt to try to pack in every single theater that they can to get as many numbers in for um
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man as they absolutely could. So, the fact that this one only took a 35% drop tells me at least those that weren't going to Spider-Man were willing still to come out, deal with the crowds, and then still go see this because, this could have been a much worse drop, being that, everybody was going to go see Spider-Man.
Yeah, I mean, I've kept a pretty good eye on our theaters' schedules this weekend,
Hmm.
and typically there would be Spider-Man in like 9 or 10 screens, but Encanto would still have like a full screen to itself,
Yeah.
and some of the other movies that we'll talk about on this list. One big reason, or at least I shouldn't say a big reason, but a decent reason for the drop is it only dropped 28% specifically on Friday. And I think part of what might be lifting this up a little bit better than expected is because we're starting to get to this point where kids are starting to get out of school for Christmas
True.
break. And when that happens, parents are looking for, okay, how can we fill the kids' time this day? Okay, let's go to the movies. So I think we're going to see a little bit of this uptick, at least in the week ahead.
Hmm.
I think it's going to lose a lot of theaters by Christmas Day for reasons we'll get into in a little bit.
Hmm.
But it's probably going to make a little. I will be curious if it can actually find a way to 100 million yet. Maybe by after New Year's weekend, we'll definitely keep an eye on it and see. But again, at least for right now, at least for these next few days, it's still the primary family/animated movie for the family to go out to. So
Yeah.
it's benefiting from that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would agree there, and and Disney is going to try to do what it can to be able to push it through as much as it can. Be like, I'm still going to hold on to that one screen.
Yep. So
All right. So number three is the second week of West Side Story, taking a 68% drop and only $3.42 million. I mean, again, this is one of those ones where it's like, I don't know. I mean, it's a good December movie, but it's a bad December movie only because of who it had to compete with in it the following week. So, you know, th-
yeah, I mean, what
I
I can
can't.
say is, yeah, because last weekend I should mention West Side Story had like all the IMAX screens, all the other large format screens, like our Cinemark XD auditorium. So it's
Hmm.
getting that premium from it, and of course it lost them all this weekend to Spidey. So there is that. Um, Again, I should also mention that I know Disney has theaters that opened it last week. They are committed to it for at least 3 weeks. I've even heard maybe it's 4. So they would have to carry it through at least December 30th or even January 6th. So it's still going to be out there for a little bit of time. And I think now that it's kind of had that big first weekend drop off, it'll probably kind of stabilize around you and probably have some pretty small drops in the next couple weekends ahead, would be my guess. But again, we'll see how it plays out. You know, again, I think it's also going to benefit from as we go into the holidays. I think it's going to do very well on the weekdays, when the older crowd is going to probably come out to, like Monday matinees or senior day matinees or what have you.
Hmm.
So this is, again, it's good. As we talked about last week, it's going to be about the long game. Obviously, a lot of movies will be competing for space, but I think this is obviously, again, to talk to points that we discussed last week, one of those movies that's going to rise to the top for the more discerning adult audience. So
Yep,
fingers crossed.
definitely. Definitely. No, you mentioned Disney, and the first thing I thought was, this is a Disney film. I forgot this is one of those ones that was in the aftermath of the Fox acquisition. Because all of a sudden I'm just like, Disney. I'm like, what? Why would Disney do that to itself? But then again, there's more to that in a couple
Yeah,
more slides.
yeah. I
Um,
mean, I mean, to keep in mind, I mean, Fox bought the remake rights to West Side Story many years ago. I think even before the merger was announced,
hmm
and they had bought the rights specifically for Steven Spielberg. So this movie has been cooking around for a long time. Again, based on stuff I was listening to earlier today, there was a very protracted casting process because they wanted, find real talented people for the movie. Find authentic Puerto Ricans for the sharks in the movie. So this is a movie that's been gestating a long time. But again, to some extent, it's Disney kind of, dumping it in a way. But
yeah,
again,
right.
we'll see what the long game of this is, and especially as this carries through into Oscar season because it's still going to be a player there as well. And it
hmm
might get a small box office bump in there, even though it'll likely be on VOD by then. But
Yep.
we'll see.
Ah. All right, going into number 4, we have Ghostbusters Afterlife at $3.4 million, taking a 52% drop. Still holding strong. I mean, like you've got here, it's week 5, and this is Ghostbusters competing against the MCU, and frankly, this ain't so bad.
Yeah, I mean, you might also mention because West Side Story was 3.42 million and Ghostbusters was 3.40, so it is a little bit of a horse race. And again,
Yeah,
when we get the final numbers on Monday evening, these two might actually swap places. Who the heck knows?
that'll be interesting to see because I could kind of see that happening just for the thing, not to say that I don't think there isn't the nostalgia factor for West Side Story, but I think from the pulp culture geek factor type of people that I think would go to see Ghostbusters in the theater and do it multiple times, I think Ghostbusters definitely would have the upper leg in that.
Yep,
So I
absolutely.
mean, you are correct. I would be kind of curious to see when the numbers finally settle, um, how inconsistent our numbers are actually going to be. Um,
Yeah. And the other thing I'll mention again here, this is getting very close to the gross of the 2016 Ghostbusters, which got
mhm.
to 128 million. So again, if it manages to retain just enough theaters over the course of the Christmas and New Year's holidays, it might even get there, which I think Sony would consider a success given this time period. So we'll see how much of an afterlife, if you will, it has in this post Spidey environment. But
And this will come up again here, but what I find actually kind of fascinating so far is everything that has been discussed so far has been either Sony or Marvel, or Sony
yep,
and Disney,
yep.
or Sony and Disney. Which I think is hilarious. Like it's like pretty much everybody else is like, you know what, we're out this week. Don't worry about it. We'll come back next month or something, or next
Or
week.
even this coming weekend,
Yeah,
as we'll get to.
yeah. Because this is one of the things that I didn't realize here is coming in at number 5, Nightmare Alley. Poor Guillermo del Toro's movie comes in its first week at a $2.96 million, which I s- I unfortunately did not get a chance to go see this. I know that you did.
Hmm.
You said you enjoyed it. I'm still looking forward to going and seeing this here. Um, this almost feels like, because when I was like, what studio would be dumb enough to drop this on the same weekend as Spider-Man? And I realized this is under the Disney umbrella.
Yep, yep. It is
So
a Fox
th-
Searchlight movie.
this is
Um,
one of those ones where I'm guessing Disney's probably like, we need to get it out. We don't know really what to do with it, so let's just get it out there.
Yeah, I mean, this could have easily. I mean, they could have easily taken the same approach that they did with Shape of Water 4 years ago, because that was a movie that opened in limited release in
Mhm,
December. They kind of expanded it sort of on Christmas weekend, but then did further expansion in January of 2018
mm,
when it got all its Oscar nominations, and that's when we finally got it here in Sioux Falls. It was like I believe it was the Friday after the Oscar nominations, which is like in the third, maybe even fourth weekend of January. So they took a really slow approach with that. Now, part of me wonders how much of that is due to you know COVID stuff and kind of the changing in
How we
theatrical
can release.
windows.
Yep.
But also, I think part of their effort here was like, we do have a movie here that has big stars in it, like Bradley Cooper and Kate Blanchett and
Mm-hmm.
Toni Collette and Willem Dafoe. Willem Dafoe in his second new movie this weekend. Who'd have
Mm-hmm.
thunk? So I think that might have geared it. I mean, the tricky thing about this movie is it is ultimately a dark movie.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely the antithesis to the type of fare that you would see during the holidays. I mean, that's kind of why you see a B cinema score here, is because it kind of ends on a bit of a downer note. It is an entirely appropriate note if you end up seeing the movie, but definitely not something that enthuses the audience as they're leaving the theater. And it is a quality movie. It is also a very long movie. It is actually even longer than Spider-Man No Way Home, like by
Oh
a couple
wow.
minutes, but it is longer. So it's a hard movie, but I will at least give them the credit of putting it out there right away, because that means I, as a moviegoer, get to see it right away.
Right.
And I'm sure, for a lot of people, Spider-Man was their first priority, but I'm sure they'll get around to Nightmare Alley again over the course of the next 2 weeks, because it'll be around for the next 2 weeks.
That's what I'm
Um,
hoping.
so again, like all these other movies that we've discussed here, and all the movies we're about to discuss in a little bit, this is all about the long game. People prioritizing what movies they want to see first during this session, but knowing that they'll have all through New Year's and even beyond to see these. So
Mm-hmm. Well, here's hoping, because I definitely want to be able to get that in before it's gone, because I think it's Del Toro. Just frankly, I think it looks like it would be something that would be good to see on the big screen.
oh, absolutely.
All right, so that is our top five. Spider-Man: No Way Home, $253 million estimated. Encanto at 6.53 million, it comes in number two. West Side Story at 3.42 million at number three. Ghostbusters Afterlife 3.4 million at number four, and Nightmare Alley at 2.96. And like we've said, still estimates, because we still haven't quite got our numbers yet. So these numbers might squeak around a little bit here, which I guess I'm actually kind of curious about, seeing how that all turns out.
Yeah.
All right, and then we've got next weekend. Um, I can certainly now this must be a Sioux Falls thing, because I'm not used to having movies released on a Saturday.
Well, here's the deal. Saturday is Christmas Day, and
Okay.
typically studios will
Oh,
release movies on
yes.
Christmas Day for those audiences.
Yeah, you're
So,
right.
so this is why we're kind of getting two waves this week, because we've got
Yep.
3 movies opening on Wednesday, trying to get a little bit of movement ahead of the holiday, and then 3 smaller movies that are going to open on Saturday. And of course, they're all still going to contend with Spider-Man.
Spider-Man.
With Spider-Man will be number 1 for at least 3 more weekends on this show, maybe even
Mm-hmm.
longer, depending how it
Mm-hmm.
holds up. But yeah, so on Wednesday, we've got The Matrix Resurrections, which is the very last dual release Warner Brothers HBO Max movie. Certainly, there's a lot of anticipation for this movie. I'm very curious what the home viewing versus theatrical split is going to be on this, because I know for myself personally, I have never seen any Matrix movie on the big screen. So to see this in that environment will be very fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious how many other people will make that choice. I know for the Wednesday night showing that I'm going to, there's already a decent amount of pre-sales for that. So fingers crossed there. We also have Sing 2 opening on Wednesday. So this will be the de facto family movie for the holidays. This is kind of where I was hinting at, Encanto is probably going to see a dip just because of Sing 2 being the hot new family movie at that
True.
point. Probably more so than the Disney Plus thing, if I were to say that. So, again, the first Sing did very well back in the day, which was 5 years ago. I think it did like $250+ million total. We'll see if this one has a shot at even getting close to that. Who the heck
Right.
knows? We also have on Wednesday, at long last, after seeing trailers for 2.5 years, The King's Man is finally in theaters. I'm going to a Tuesday night preview of this, it'll just be nice to know this movie exists so I can stop seeing trailers for this movie at every theater showing that I go to. So that
There's a
is the holiday
Tuesday.
gift of itself.
There is a Tuesday night preview for that one.
Yep, they are starting at 4 p.m. because
Ooh.
just putting it out there. Um,
Ooh.
and then on Saturday, Christmas Day, we have the nationwide expansion of Paul Thomas Anderson's Licorice Pizza, which among the film buff crowd is certainly like the big movie for this season. Certainly the hot ticket. It's been playing only in New York and LA in 2 theaters in each city since Thanksgiving weekend. But now it's going to be opening in about 750 theaters nationwide. Sioux Falls is getting one of those theaters for that. So that'll be very exciting to see how that fares.
Mm-hmm.
We also have on Saturday American Underdog, the Kurt Warner story, going after the faith-based crowd and the football loving crowd. I did see this movie last night during one of its early sneak previews. It's a solid movie. Zachary Levi's great. Anna Paquin's great. I think it'll find its audience there over the course of the holidays, just to see how that plays out. Certainly, the holidays have been very beneficial to football movies like The Blind Side back in the day, so we'll see how far this goes. And then, last but not least, we have A Journal for Jordan, the latest movie from director Denzel Washington, not starring Denzel Washington. It instead stars Michael B. Jordan. Definitely going for the sentimental tearjerker crowd with that movie. I know that's also had some sneak previews these past several weekends, but I haven't gone to any of those. But again, this is going to be very interesting because, again, we've got 6 movies. They're all going to be fighting for those 2 through 5 spots on our top 5 because, again, Spidey's still going to be number 1. We'll also still see how West Side Story and even Encanto and Ghostbusters still try to hang on in amidst this. So, as we get into Christmas, this is always one of the most exciting box office times of the year because lots of movies, lots of stuff for everybody, lots of people showing up to the theaters. It's going to be very exciting to see next weekend and the weekend after how far we get. So
definitely. Well, awesome. I definitely look forward to this upcoming weekend and seeing how well everything plays out. And at first I was going to say maybe I'm doing a double feature of the Kingsmen and Resurrections, but clearly that might not be the case.
just saying.
So, that being said, that has been the box office this week. We definitely look forward to seeing what we got coming up here next week. Be sure to follow us on all the socials, like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. In regards to the podcast, definitely subscribe there and check us out on Patreon. Until next time here, this has been Brian and Derek with the box office, and we will see you next week.
See ya.